that are going to ask in a bit. We will be recording the session, so you should get the opt-in if you want to be a part of the recording. But thank you all for joining us. My name is Cameron Law. I serve as the Executive Director of the Carlson Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship, and we're excited to partner with the Tech Futures Group on this 4-part series. So it'll be Tuesday, Thursday this week, and then back at it Tuesday, Thursday next week. The series is all about catalyzing growth and the path to product market fit. So we're excited to have you. Just a little context of this program is a part of the Accelerate California Hub program. So we appreciate the support of Cal OSBA, the Office of the Small Business Advocate. And you're going to be in great hands here with our partners at the Tech Futures Group, led by Steve. And he'll probably do a quick introduction of himself and in a bit, but really appreciate all the guest speakers that are here, and for all of you entrepreneurs that are in this space to come and learn, and also the risk you're taking in being an entrepreneur. So know I'm here to support you, and look forward to the session. So take it away, Steve.
Great, thanks, Cameron, and thanks everybody for coming. I'm aware there's a couple of other things going on today, so I appreciate everybody making time to get here. I'm sure you're all as eager as I am to get to the pregame of the Ducks-Blackhawks game after this, but no, seriously, I think someone in my position in these circumstances would usually ask you to turn off your cell phones and your social and so on, just out of kind of respect, but I can't see what you're doing. You can do whatever you want in that case, but I would still suggest the same thing, because nothing of interest is going to happen out there until at least 3 p.m. our time. So it's a great, shut it off, turn off the news feeds, and think of all the massive dopamine hit you'll get when you get them all coming in at you at 2:30. Okay, so onwards. So as Cameron said, catalyzing growth, path to product market fit, 4 sessions. This is the first on customer validation. Okay, if I get the mouse happening correctly. There we go. So we'll do some very brief introductions, talk about the overview, session 1, and then we're going to do a little bit of panel discussion and AMA at the end of it. I'll be talking for roughly an hour, maybe a little more because of the overview. Cameron and Nils Davis are going to be monitoring the chat and Q&A, so don't be shy about jumping in with questions. If they're lengthy questions, we may defer towards the end, but if they're quick questions or just a point of clarification, don't be shy, jump in. Joining me briefly, Dave Weiner, in front of the Golden Gate Bridge there. He runs the NSF I-Corps program out of Berkeley. He'll have quite a bit to say as we go along. And then to the right of him on my screen, in front of a pretty sunset, Matt Magno. He's CEO of Japa. He's a great young SaaS entrepreneur, founder, CEO, and he'll be taking part in the panel and AMA as well. So they are both they both have targets on their fronts for you. Anything you want to know about how they did it or what they do. So with all that said, I want to get your attention with this horrible bright green screen, because maybe it's different from what you've been watching on TV for the last 24 hours. Why are we here today? And this is both a shorter-term question and a longer-term question. And where I really want to frame this to start, because, catalyzing growth, what are you catalyzing growth for? For a successful company. Okay, 99% of startups never even raise their first round. Okay, so partially this series is about helping you with skills around customer validation and product development and go-to-market. But that's also become table stakes for going to raise money. And let me just spend a minute here just on how tough this is. 99% never raise their round. Why is that? Well, there are 2 main reasons, but I'll suggest to you that by far the biggest reason is they fail the customer validation test. They haven't done what they need to do. When I first got into this business many more years ago than I care to count, it was still possible for a couple of smart people to walk into a conference room and put on a whiteboard what they were going to do and walk out on a term sheet. Hasn't happened in a long time anywhere other than a sitcom. These are now table stakes, and we'll talk more about that. Okay, so you guys can do the math. That means 1% do get funded. Okay, good. And we're talking about institutional funding here, not friends and family or even angels or micro angels. Macro angels, family offices, they look a little more like institutional rounds. So you get that 1%, and what's that for? It's to launch your MVP, right? That's really what we'll be talking about next session. And then what do you need? You need more money. Well, guess what? Most companies fail to raise that second round as well, right? Depending on your source, somewhere between 85 and 95% never get funded, and source and industry. I'll pause here briefly just to say the invitation said, this was kind of for the SaaS world. Almost everything we're talking about today, for sure, I would argue is relevant to startups in any industry. My particular background is SaaS since before it was called SaaS. So if I don't ever say it's SaaS, that's because that's the air I breathe. And this is all going to be very, very relevant for SaaS companies. If anyone else is in the audience with a different kind of company, by all means, let's put your hand up and we'll chat about that later. Okay, so these guys don't raise the second round because they really haven't reached product market fit. Okay, that's where by and large they fail. So roughly 10% raise second rounds, and guess what? That means if you do the math from the top to the bottom, about 0.1% of companies now get a chance to succeed, because that second round is about go-to-market and scale. And what that gives you, if you have go-to-market and scale, now you're only 3 or 4 more years away, if nothing else goes wrong, from success. Because SaaS companies take 7 to 12 years to get to some kind of liquidity exit. And so one answer as to why we're here today is, if you look down, oops, where's my, this whole right-hand column, this is really what this series is about: validation, product market fit, growth, so that you can raise money and move to success. Okay, so those are kind of one way to look at what we're going to be talking about over the next, series of 4 lectures. I am challenged with my mouse, sorry. So just how hard is this? I want to give you some sense. You do that math, that's 1,000 to 1 odds. What does that mean? Let me put that into context of some things that are, maybe common experience. Well, acceptance top 10 US universities, that's about a 33 to 1 if you've applied. Okay, so factor for how you don't apply, but 33 to 1 to get into Harvard, MIT, Stanford, Yale, Princeton, pick your schools. Not easy. To play in an NFL game, but let's not, I'm not ever going to play. Nils and Dave are never going to play. So let's put it in. Let's assume you're already a D1 college player. You're already that good. Okay, your odds are still about 333 to 1. So getting to the second institutional round of a SaaS startup is only about 3 times harder than making the NFL, assuming you're already a great college player. This is the hardest thing any of us will ever try to do unless we actually wind up in a shooting war. And may we never wind up there. If it were easy, everybody would do it. That's what it is. So it's not to discourage you. Thousands of startups get funded and hundreds of them are successful every year. But let's look at why it's so hard and give you the best possible chance to getting out there and being successful. So just go, as my kids when they were young used to say, Daddy, ask the Google. So I asked the Google, why do startups fail? And here's the list you get. I've broken them into 3 groups, right? That list of 8 there, you can read them. Here's a couple of others that kind of group together, and here's 2 more that kind of group together. I grouped them this way because from my perspective, really, this left-hand group, this defines the lack of product market fit. These are just 8 different ways to say we didn't get there. And I would argue that they are excuses, all hiding the reason, which is we didn't achieve product market fit. These two are just the result of product market fit. Investors don't put more money into companies that don't have product market fit. I mean, this is a little bit like saying, doctor, why did the patient die? Well, his heart stopped. Yeah, well, was it because of a bullet or a car accident or a heart attack, or what was it? All companies fail because they run out of cash. Why do they run out of cash? Mostly because they didn't have product market fit. And then third is team. And this is quite arguably a different category of fish. If you've been in this business for a while, the things you see happen with team are truly mind-blowing. I would suggest to you that often you can categorize this team bucket as why they didn't get to product market fit. Team dysfunction is what creates the longer list on the left that results in the shorter list on top. Now, for our purposes today, I'm going to suggest to you that one of these on the list is particularly critical, and that's ignoring customers, or better said, failing to understand your customers. And that mistake drives every other problem on this page. And so we're going to spend much of our rest of our time talking about that. So why are we here today? To get customer validation as right as we can. So let's with that, hopefully I've got your attention and some at least a little bit of credibility on why you should pay attention here for the next hour and a bit, instead of to the chaos outside. So let's finally do a bit of an overview. So product market fit, I hope I've convinced you, really matters. It is a process, not an event. But because time has this linear component to it, we're going to address it in linearity. As you're running a startup, it's going to be a series of circles and spirals. It's not going to be linear. I'll tell you that from the start. But here we are on November 5th, customer discovery and validation. We'll see you on Thursday to talk about product development and MVP and positioning. Next Tuesday, we'll talk about go-to-market strategy and execution, and we'll wind it up with commercialization and venture readiness next Thursday. Now, I've done the arrows both ways, not because we're going to take you back and forth among these, but just to kind of reinforce, as you're running a company, you're going 2 steps forward and 1 step back, and sometimes you're going 3 steps back, and that's what's called a pivot. And we'll talk about that later as well. So intros. And the format. Sorry, that format's going to be, for all 4 of these, about an hour of presentation. We'll have some guest comments today. That's Dave and Matt. On Tuesday, it's going to be another SaaS CEO. Sorry, on Thursday. Next Tuesday, it'll be yet another SaaS CEO, and Nils is going to join us in his role as host to the product management podcast. And then on November 14th, we've got yet another SaaS CEO and a real life practicing venture capital guy. So I hope you'll find all of those interesting. We'll do a little bit of kind of panel discussion with those guys, and then throw it open for AMA. All right. Briefly, the Tech Futures Group. We're a Northern California subset of a national program. It is designed to give for people like Matt or other founders and CEOs in Northern California, help from people like me, and there are like 15 or 17 other colleagues if you don't like me. And it's all funded by the taxpayers. So I'd encourage you, if you're a startup and you're looking for some advisory help, take a look at TFG, put in an application. It takes probably 20-30 minutes to do the application. And if you get accepted, then you get some help. And then Dave, maybe right there. Sorry, I should have given you the entree here. You want to add something about NSF and how it interacts with similar to and interacts with TFG as well?
Oh yeah, sure. Hey everyone, Dave Weiner from NSF iCore at UC Berkeley. It's basically a customer discovery, customer validation course that we run at UC Berkeley every single month, focus on this exact same methodology that Steve's going to do a much deeper dive into. And we also constantly are referring founders and startups after they do our program to the Tech Futures Group. It is the gold standard technology commercialization resource and program in Northern California. So I'll just say, yeah, I love customer discovery. I love customer validation. It's what I live and breathe, and looking forward to learning more about it from Steve today.
And I've encouraged Dave and Matt, by the way, to jump in as we go along, up to and including contradicting me. I mean, we could spend a semester talking about this stuff. There's no way I can cover it all or get everything right in an hour-ish. So I'm counting on them to give you different perspectives as we go along as well. Okay, so me, why are you listening to me? I want to get this thing out of, oops, oh well. I've got all the talking heads in the wrong spot. There we go. Oh well, sorry. I've been in the Valley a really long time at this point. As I said, I started as a strategy consultant. There wasn't such a thing as SaaS when I started. Tells you how old I am. It was software, and so I've been working with software companies since the very beginning of the conversion to what's become known as the SaaS model in 99, 2000, 2001. I have had executive roles in multiple SaaS startups. I've been a CEO, a CFO, a CMO. Here are three of them, except was enterprise class product management and planning. That's where Nils and I met. True Value Labs was fintech. We sold that to FactSet a few years ago. Case was edge IT management. We sold that to Dell. There's several others that I didn't include because they weren't nearly as interesting as outcomes. I've spent the last 5 years running an early stage SaaS venture fund, the Entrepreneurial Fund, including 8 SaaS boards. I wound up on the board at True Value. Owl is a digital health company. Cognitive Scale was a big AI company founded on IBM's Watson. There were 5 others that I was on the board of. And for the last 13, 14 years, I've been part of a very interesting CIO roundtable where 4 times a year we sit down with CIOs from 8 to 12 Fortune 500 companies and talk about what's on their mind. And I was with them 2 weeks ago yesterday, and they actually had some very interesting things to say that are relevant to this. So I'll be bringing them in. So this is not to like boost my ego because none of these did well enough to buy me the private jet that I do not fly to the 1,000-acre ranch that I do not own in Wyoming. But I have been in your, some of these were good, some of these were bad, some of these were okay. I've been in your chair. I've done this a lot. Doesn't mean I've got all the right answers, but hopefully I can give you the benefit of both my prior wins and failures in this domain. And then of course I do CEO advisory with TFG. Dave, you mentioned the I-Corps. How long you've been there, and what was your brief background before that?
Yeah, I'm a former PhD student who got super into entrepreneurship and never looked back. Founded a company, worked at early stage startups in San Francisco. That brought me to I-Corps at UC Berkeley. I wish I had done this when I first got into entrepreneurship. I didn't understand customer validation, customer discovery. I just thought you build it, you do sales. That's what customer discovery is. But it's actually something remarkably different and a very magical process. And I've been at UC Berkeley running I-Corps for the last 4 years. We run it for early stage technology-based startups and founders to go through it and do this exact process to really validate who your customer is and why before you go to market. So yeah, it's something I'm really passionate about and love working with early stage founders as they validate that big problem and that urgent need that they can go out there and then solve.
Cool. And Matthew, you want to give just a few seconds on where you came from and what you're doing?
Yeah. No, thanks for having me, Steve, Cameron, Dave, great to see you. Yeah, I think customer validations is great. I mean, starting my company as a student in college, I think if we didn't do customer validation, I think we wouldn't be in the spot we are today. It's, my whole philosophy is, understand your customers, make your customers your best friends, even if they're not your customers yet, because your best friend's problems like the back of your hand. So if you understand your customer's problem like the back of your hand, then you can really, really go far. I have some great stories to tell about what we've done in my experience, but excited to share it with everyone.
Great. So Matt just summed the whole thing up. So we thank you for coming and good luck. Onwards. Okay, so let me take a few minutes because I never know how much all of you know about how venture capital works and what's important to investors in today's environment. And just to be clear, they're going to rip away my VC union card. Good God, they might even take my vest. But let me tell you a little bit. We're going to spend 5 minutes on how venture capital works at the early stage, and then we'll dump in and why customer validation is so important to fulfilling investors' expectations. And then we'll dig into kind of a customer validation playbook. Okay, so Noel Fenton, one of the grand old men of probably 2 generations ago of venture capital, explained this to me one day as he was busy telling us he was not going to invest in my company. There are pinch points in life. Some of them are, they include job negotiations, occasionally marriages, certainly divorces, contract negotiations. One of them is an investment. And you got to understand that the investor's job, if they're a professional investor, if it's your mom's cousin, that's a different thing. But if it's a professional investor, that person's job is to take as much of the ownership of your company as he or she possibly can at the lowest possible price. That's what they get paid to do. And don't get confused that the venture industry is there as kind of this beneficial, beneficent entity to support young CEOs. No, they're there to take your blood from your arteries. At the point of funding, and then as soon as you become financed, then all your interests are aligned again until the next financing comes along. And so your job is to attract the money while resisting the price squeeze, because the implication here is the investor has hundreds, if not thousands, of companies where she can allocate her funds. You need her money. So the power balance is really off. And so you have to do the best job you possibly can to convince them that they have to put their money into you and no one else at a price that works for you. Happens again every time you raise money. So raise money as few times as you can manage. And pro tip, if you can manage 0, boy, do I recommend that. My favorite company of all time was MailChimp, which had a $4 billion exit with 0 venture capital. So the founders took it all. Someone, I forget who it is, but I learned recently that another company did better than that. They did better than that, but I'll have to get the company for the next time we talk. And so you just have to be in the strongest position you can possibly be in each time you raise money. Okay. Because if you're in the weak, they smell blood and it's just chum in the water and the shark circle. And if you're lucky, you get another round. And if you're not lucky, you're one of those 99% that went away on our prior slide here. Okay, so how do you do that? It's about risk, and specifically, it's about de-risking. And so there's a ladder of proof. You can find many of them out there. This is an interesting one I saw this week from a fund called NFX. And we're not going to go through all of this. But you can see, just how many elements there are to get up to what they would call fundability. And that's probably 3 tiers of funding there. There's a seed up to the, great team, fresh, good idea. Then there's that would be a pre-seed, then probably a seed up to paying customers. And boy, if you can achieve everything on that top half of that ladder, that's probably your Series A. Levels may vary, approaches may vary. Every fund's got a different version of this, but it's a good one. You can look it up and see articles written on it, newsletters written on it. This is for your investors first and foremost. But I mentioned my CIO roundtable from a couple of weeks ago. For the first time in about 5 years, big companies are are solidly back to the side of the pendulum swing where they are much more concerned about risk than they are concerned about growth. Now, this pendulum swings every 5 years or so, depending on markets and international events and technology. But right now, we're really in a risk-averse environment. And so part of what you have to be doing in customer validation is understanding where your customers believe their risks lie, how you mitigate those, and then, because your investors have their list of risks that's on this ladder here, and then you've got the extra step is now you have to convince your investors that you've convinced your customers that you are de-risking your customers as well. So there are two plays at work here, and it's brought a whole new cadre of people you have to talk to during customer validation into the fold, really in the last 3 to 6 months. It would be my assessment. It's been building, obviously. I was in a meeting in Italy 2 summers ago, and people were starting to talk about it. Now it's here. So today we're going to focus on the very bottom of this ladder with some comments on great team. Next week we'll hit on, on Thursday we'll hit on fresh, good idea and product. And you can see go-to-market pieces that align in there, but we'll make our way up the ladder as we go. So how do you de-risk? What do your investors need to hear and see? What do you have to therefore do before you meet with them? And how do you put your company at the head of the line? Because remember, I gave you the number that 99% never raise. Even of those that do, a typical investor will look at 100 decks a week, have 5 to 10 presentations a week, and maybe fund 1 or 2 a month. That would be a busy funding month. Maybe they won't fund any that month. Okay, so you just have to understand the kind of the odds you're going up against. So there are many different kinds of risks, taking a different cut at this. The nice thing about SaaS is most of the technical risk has been taken out of it. Okay, if you're working on a cure for cancer, this is a big deal. If you're working on sub-nanoscale semiconductors, this is a big deal. People pretty much know how to build software at this point. It's not that hard. Even the AI can do it, which leads another, so maybe now we have another generation of risk being incorporated, but people haven't sorted that out yet, much that I can tell. You might have regulatory risk. This was much more, applicable maybe over the summer when we were talking climate tech and medical devices. But now that software really has eaten the world, I showed you 2 of my companies. One was in fintech, one was in digital health. We had regulatory to deal with, depending what you're in. If you're in energy, if you're a climate tech software company, you may really have regulatory, so pay attention to it. Market demand is certainly a risk, competitive risk, your go-to-market risk, your channel and partners. Your team is filled with the risk, and then that team's ability to scale and to execute. And of course, always financial risk. A common question for investors is, okay, if this takes twice as long and costs twice as much, and I have to fire the entire funding team, can I still make money on this deal? And you got to kind of have that, the answer to that's got to be yes. So you have to mitigate a lot of different things here. The big new one is security. This is what I pulled away from my CIOs. They need to be 100% certain that you are not creating new cyber risk if they deploy on you. All right, so you're gonna have to think about all the different aspects there of data security, network security, sign-on security. Probably half the people on this call know more about it than I do. I just know your security risk to a new company has to be absolutely zero. And you better be mitigating other risks they have because of whatever value or application or solution you're delivering. Okay, so we can't deal with all those today. That bracket, regulatory demand, competitive and channels, falls under customer validation. As I said a minute ago, validation has become table stakes. Even 10 years ago, in any upswing, you can come into in any up market, you can come into a venture and kind of say, oh yeah, we haven't done customer validation yet, but look, here's my track record, here's our ideas. It won't take that much go. And you probably get a term sheet. Right now, not happening. It is as strict as it's ever been. And if you come in without validation, you're not going to get much of anywhere. Unless you're, I don't know, if you're Mark Benioff's nephew and he sent you to his 3 favorite investors and you've got a great idea, maybe you can, but short of that, not a lot of luck. How many customers, they want to know how many customers have you talked to, what have you learned, and who can you sell to? Okay, now again, you go back 5 or 10 years. Okay, Matt, who can you sell to? Oh, we're going to sell to IT and facilities directors at universities and hospitals. That was a good answer 5 years ago. A very legitimate answer. If you try to do that now, they're going to say, no, you misunderstood. We want to know who are the 20 people that you know by name, title, email, phone number, connection, and why they'll buy from you because you understand their problems so well, who are going to generate your first 5 to 10 sales. Right? Now, if you've been in some industry and you're coming out of it, you've been there for 10 years and you know a lot of people, this might be an easy question for you to answer. Okay? But if you're not like that, this is another tremendous output of doing customer validation, right? Because then if you've talked to 100 people, my goodness, you do know 20 who said, wow, I love what you're doing, Matt. When can I learn more? Oh, geez, can I use you as a reference and due diligence for our venture capital meetings? Why, yes, I would love it if you did that. Now you're where you need to be. This is where you love. I mean, this is a win. Sorry, I skipped this. Because of my peripatetic career and how long it's been, I've done somewhere around 10,000 customer interviews, maybe more by this point. Did my most recent couple yesterday. So all of these things I have heard on the phone doing customer validation. How soon can I have it? Do you have a customer advisory board that I could join? Can we be a beta? And my personal favorite, which has happened more than once. Wow, do you have any jobs I could have? Okay, this does happen. If you're on something and if you're on the right market, you start hearing these kinds of things, you are very, very fundable. On the flip side, do not say any of the following, because I've heard all these too as an investor. Oh, we haven't gotten to that step yet. Oh, okay, go away. Come back when you have. We can't tell anyone what we're doing. You know what? Everybody knows already. Don't be stupid. And if another truism of venture, when there are this many entrepreneurs around, if you are walking in the door with an idea to show me, I have seen 3 more before you and 3 more after you that are almost identical. So if you're in stealth, fine. 5 other companies have already told me exactly what they're doing. It's close to what you're doing. So you just cut yourself out of the loop. And the worst possible one, we know this market so well that we don't need to talk to anyone. Kiss of death. It proves you're naive. You may not be stupid. You may be very intelligent, but it proves you're naive and arrogant. And I have no interest in working with you, and neither will any other VC. So be very, very cautious of as Mark Twain said, it's not what you don't know that hurts you. It's what you know, but you're wrong, that will absolutely kill you. So what is customer validation? Okay, well, here's kind of a GPT generated Harvard Business Review version of it. You can read it without me, but highlights gathering feedback, making sure you're providing real value, increased chances of success. Let's turn that into like English. With great debt to Peter Thiel here. I'll talk more about him in a moment. What's the one thing that you do so well for a very small and specific customer group that they will pay you more than anyone else will pay you, and they want to buy it faster from you than anyone else? Okay, this is the so let's unpack each of those elements, and then we'll wrap it up. So what's the one thing you do so well? The interesting part about, I used to be among the crowd that would tell every startup to focus, 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 focus. And about 14 months ago, I happened to be listening to a panel with Vinod Khosla from Khosla Ventures. And he said, no, focus is the wrong thing for a raw startup. And all of us, our jaws dropped and like, what the hell? I mean, vNode is saying don't focus. And really what he was doing was breaking this into two elements. Early customer validation has to be discovered, because the idea you have is almost certainly not the idea you're going to go for funding for, right? You are discovering, of all the pains and problems that are out there that you could work on, which one are you going to work on? Where is the gravitational attraction in the market that pulls your idea and technology and capabilities towards that? The signal is going to be very, very weak. Okay, you're going to have to talk to a lot of people and listen hard. And I can't tell you often enough to tape or, to record or write down every interview and review them with some regularity, because there are going to be things that you've forgotten that you heard that will be confirmatory, and are going to be really important. You don't want to miss them. Once you've got convergence, then it's time for focus. And this is where you're building your database on the thing you're going to do. And the signal gets much stronger. But keep in mind, just because you can do a lot of things for many different customers doesn't mean that you should, at least not out the gate. Every great company has started with one problem to one group of customers and then expanded out. Take your metaphor, but the peanut butter gets too thin, or time is the way of making sure we don't do everything all at once. Do one thing really well, then move to the next thing. And really well means not better. It means flat out different. And you can find scores of successful entrepreneurs who've said some version of this. Steve Jobs, Mark Benioff, Elon Musk, a guy whose name escapes me at the moment, but he started the huge challenger bank in Latin America. Right, you got to go do something different. No one wants a better mousetrap. Uninteresting from a venture point of view. Go do that with a different style of funding. But what this gives you is, a head start advantage, a pricing advantage, and basically, first in, last out, right? If you've built it up, it's much, much harder to kill you. To a specific cohort, and this is really where Thiel's book comes in. If you haven't read it, I cannot recommend it highly enough for any startup. It'll take you about 90 minutes to go through it the first time, and then you just keep it by your desk and note it and keep referring back to it. And his examples of every great company is built on the support of a small. He's talking about PayPal and Twitter and Facebook, and his world was mass consumer products that now have tens, if not hundreds, of millions of users. Twitter was built on 36 people. That's how it got scale and got funded, and then went up from there. Your pricing and your economics become coherent because you're dealing with one problem with one group of people. It decreases your cost of net customer acquisition by practically an order of magnitude. So you can go get customers who don't know anything about you for $10, or get customers who heard about you and want to work with you for $1. And yet company after company after company fails that IQ test. Okay, don't be one of those. And it's a product lab. These are not the people who will say, that didn't work. Okay, bye, I'll try something else. No, these are the people who are as invested in you being successful as you are. They want your product to work. That's why they're working with you. They will give you feedback. They will do whatever they can to help you. They might even invest in you. So keep them close. Third concept, and staying with this, is this. God, when Nils and I were young and electricity was just being deployed in California, Jeffrey Moore wrote this book called Crossing the Chasm. It still has truisms in it, and the big one is go after the early adopters and the innovators, right? These are the people who will define, who will come after you sooner, faster, with more money, because they need you more than anyone else needs you. He called them the visionaries, early adopters. Steve Blank called them the evangelaries, I believe. You can go to Steve Blank's site and get Okay, we're doing a 2-hour course. Steve used to do a 16-week course on customer validation, and all of his materials are up on his website, available for free. Go wild. They're a little dated. He stopped being active about 10 years ago, but they're really good. And so our goal here, you want to spend enough time that you've convinced yourself and your potential investors and your potential customers that you are bringing them a cure for a real pain felt by a real target base. It's not a solution to today's problem or an incremental benefit. And the way many salespeople talk about this, many revenue-driven people, is, are you bringing them an aspirin, which is not that interesting, or are you curing a disease or saving a life? And it's not a bad metaphor. If you're in med tech or biotech or digital health, maybe it's not a metaphor, maybe it's a real thing. If you're in any other industry, it's a metaphor. But run with it because it's really important. And keep in mind, it's going to take you 2, 3, 4 years to get to scale. Okay, the headache may have gone away. Right, you have to be pointing your company towards something that's going to be a big problem 4 years from now, not 4 months from now. Okay, let's pause super briefly there. Nils, have we got anything in the chat we should address, or Dave or Matt, you want to add anything at this point? Or I can just go on.
Yeah, sorry, I'm trying to unmute myself. Okay, so we did have one question from Jane. Jane, do you want to ask your question? Or do you feel like you got it addressed?
No, that's fine. I just posted it again. I was wondering if if we are to have any sort of a detailed process that we will be asked to provide to the funder that shows what type of discovery we went through or what the results may have been.
I would say, and Dave, you should jump in. Well, Dave and Matt should both jump in from their perspective. My quick answer. No one cares about the process very much.
Mm-hmm.
What they care about is that you have spoken to enough people that you have confidence in your sample such that you can give them confidence in your sample.
Okay.
We'll talk later and we'll talk in a few slides about what at least some of the key issues that you have to address there are, but I don't think there's any gold standard in, I don't think you can go to Wikipedia and say, here is the customer validation process.
Okay.
But Dave, you may have a different perspective on that.
No, yeah, I totally agree from my experience. And we'll talk, I think, a lot more about, hey, how do you do this? How do you conduct this validation? But generally my view is, hey, if you can go and say, hey, I've spoken to 115 different stakeholders. This is what they all said. This is what the biggest problems they face are. This is the urgent need that they have. And this is what their willingness to pay is if someone helps solve that. And here's how my solution can do that. I think if you have enough data points that say that, that's a very powerful message to share to any investor. So that's I think if you can do this process and really validate that urgent problem and who's facing it and what their willingness is to pay to solve that, that's a powerful message to be able to share.
Yeah, I agree as well. I mean, if you have no traction for early stage companies, this is a good way to show that you're on top of everything, and it's a form of traction, but not like revenue wise, but it's definitely a great step forward.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Nils, you're muted again.
I would add one thing on the willingness to pay side. It's probably not the best way to find out if they're willing to pay just to ask them, would you pay for this? Is to find out, what are you paying now to solve this problem? Or what is the pain that what is the cost of the pain that you're having? Because Steve and I have both been in companies where somebody said, would you buy this if we built it? And people said yes, and then they didn't buy it when we built it. And so, that's a danger.
Yeah, I totally agree on that. And my view is never even present your solution. You should never be really even talking about what it is you do. I know there'll be a lot more on that coming from Steve in just a minute. But yeah, hey, if someone could save you that hour a day or whatever it may be, like, what would that be worth to you? And that will help you understand what the value is to the customer and what they might be willing to pay for a solution like yours. So yeah, 100% agree. That's a fantastic advice.
Jane, I'll put one bonus comment on that I didn't really focus on in this deck at all.
Sure.
Especially with, pre-seed, seed, even Series A. The investor knows that the plan you're bringing to him or her is just one version of what is not going to happen. Right. They want to know the quality of the research, the quality of the thinking, but really what they're doing is betting on you and your team. And so the customer validation process is a tremendous way to slide credibility for yourselves into that, because you should be telling them what you learned and why customer validation meets your solution and so on. But you must have a slide in your deck called lessons learned. And that lessons learned line should help them understand where you started in your journey and where you've ended up after customer validation. What did you learn? What surprised you? And how did that change your thinking? Because if you say, yeah, we went in, we talked to 100 people, they all said exactly what we thought they were going to say, so give us a bunch of money. No. You say, okay, we went in, we talked to 10 people, we were really surprised by the following, so we pivoted our idea over to here. We learned that and uncovered this new thing, which means that changed our go-to-market idea. You can do the rest of the script. But that tells me off the gate, you're curious, you listen, you'll take advice when you hear it, and you will modify your approach as the inevitable slings and arrows come at you, because no company ever gets through clean.
That's great. Thank you, everyone. That's great contribution. Really, really appreciate it.
Cool. Glad to do it. Okay, onwards. Unless Nils, anything else we should tap on here?
I don't see any other questions at the moment.
Okay, so let's talk about playbook. What are all the questions we learned when we were in like second grade? Who, what, when, where, how, why? Let's hit each of them. When I touched on this a little bit already, it never stops. You're always doing customer validation. You may be doing it at a low level or a high level, depending where you are in your business phase. But even once you're scaling, the most successful companies do postmortems and analytics on every customer interaction. These are companies that are already $1 billion. They still do it because that tells them where the market's headed and what gaps they're missing and what opportunities lay out. Okay, I'm going to assume none of you are currently at $1 billion in revenue. I know it's a wild, kind of an extravagant assumption, but let's assume for the purposes of today, let's go there. Starting with discovery, that was what we called kind of discovery A and then validation. Okay, then you're going to be talking about solutions, as these guys said, willingness to pay and scale. Just like the customer validation, product development, go to market, these are loops. You're going to be talking about all these simultaneously. Generally speaking, you want to be moving up and to the right in this direction. It's a process or even a series of processes, not a task. So please never make the mistake of, we did 50 customer interviews, our customer validation is done, we never have to go do that again. Nope, never ends. Okay, breadth and depth. So let's talk about who and what you have to cover. So one major risk is market demand. Okay, well, clearly, who do you talk to? You're going to talk to prospective customers. I'll talk more about prospective customers in a minute. You need to come at them by segments. So where's your product targeted? I would say enterprise and industrial are both big companies, but financial services and there are companies that basically work in office buildings, and there are companies that basically work in industrial parks, and they're very, very different. Okay, and I was up at Chevron a couple of weeks ago, and I spent time in the headquarters, and I spent time at the refinery. And those are so different. Those are actually two completely separate, different organizations, right? And they buy differently, and they're organized differently, and they only roll up when you get to the very top. Not many small companies can do small businesses and enterprises. That's something you grow into. Pick one, start there, then bleed out. And then consumer, of course, is typically different. And government, depending who you're selling to, it might be enterprise, it might be SMB. And personas, right? Who are going to be your users, the influencers, the buyers, the functional heads, right? Who's going to sign the agreement to do a contract? Who's going to sign the contract, and who's going to sign the purchase order? And you need to talk to all of those people. In some cases, they might be the same. In some cases, they might be different. But if you've got a piece of marketing tech, boy, you better be talking to the CMO and the CRO, and procurement and finance and legal, and you better be talking to some hands on the ground marketers, because if the CMO buys it and his team won't use it, ain't got a lot of use. And this new one that I've highlighted a couple of times, I've gotten green, be talking to security, especially if you're going to go sell to government or big business. You better know every single security and cyber requirement they have before you try to start selling to them, because you could be 6 months down a sale and discover that there's something that's going to take you 6 months more to introduce and develop, and you just lost a year of company cycle. Competition, well, the 2x2 competitive matrix that shows all the other idiots in the lower left and you in the upper right has become so trite, it's almost a negative now in a venture pitch. Okay, it's not insightful. Basically, it says you went and found 3 other logos, figured out some axis that you look good on, and slapped them down there, and you don't know anything about them. You should, if you're going into an investor meeting, you should know everything there is to know about your competitors, what they're doing, what they could do, because really the question you're going to have to be able to answer is, why is your company going to do better than they will? And there are technical reasons, there are strategic reasons, there are probably other reasons, but the joke around Silicon Valley is, well, because my team of Bulgarian mathematicians is better than your team of Bulgarian mathematicians. And that just doesn't fly. Again, I'd reference you to Peter Thiel here. A great thing to do, or Clayton Christensen, if you want to go way back. Tried and true. Find some very large company that's not moving very quickly and go pick off a tiny, tiny, tiny little bit of their business that they won't even notice until it's gone. That's a great strategy. Not the only great strategy, but it's a good one. Partners. You should be talking to your customers. I think it was Nils said earlier, what's the whole value chain around your solution and who else is in it? Who are you possibly going to tick off? Who do you need to work with? Who's a partner that you could work with opportunistically so that both of you benefit? These might be new companies, they might be established participants, but know who they are, both from their point of view and from the channel point of view. And the real bonus issue here, another reason to really, really understand this is, I don't know when IPOs are coming back. It's probably not in my career horizon to get more than a couple of tech IPOs per quarter. So the exit is by M&A. And most M&As for software companies go to larger software companies with whom they've already had a really super successful partnership. One of those logos I showed you in my introduction, Case Networks, got sold to Dell for a very sweet outcome because we partnered relentlessly with Dell. And one day, literally, Michael called the Case founder, reached him at the Case founder's kids' AYSO soccer game, and 3 weeks later, there was a deal. Pretty good outcome. So your partners eat you. So choose your partners carefully and work with them early. And make the pie. Don't worry about who gets how much of a pie. If the pie is bigger, it doesn't matter what percentage who gets. And then regulatory, if this is meaningful in your domain. So this is a bit of a, I won't read all this to you. It's a bit of a summary of the who, but at different stages, under problem, get to as many different people as you can. Once you've nailed what your solution is really going to be, then focus in on those customers. Who are the early adopters? Because they'll tell you about price points and pricing model. And make sure, I've used the term ICP here in case you don't know what it means. It's ideal customer profile. right? This has different parameters based on what markets you might be in, but generally speaking, it's going to be the industry, the size of company, the role of the person you're selling to. There might be some demographic concerns around it, but nail it as tightly as you can. Early stages, diversity, and then I think everything else on this page we've talked, one of us has talked about in the last few minutes. Across the bottom, just going to have anywhere else to put it. LinkedIn has absolutely ruined the market for trying to get interviews done. Because when I started as a young consultant, if you made your way through a VP or even a C-level person, there were so many blocks and barriers between you and that person that generally just out of admiration, holy cow, how'd you get to me? Okay, you get 15 minutes or 20 minutes for that. Now anybody can connect with anybody on LinkedIn. And it's really, really very difficult. Anybody correct me if you've got a different perspective. I think you have to start with your connections and ask everyone you talk to for their connections. And if they'll give you an introduction, that's even better. I'm doing a project right now. I would tell you it's the second hardest set of group of customer interviews to get that I've ever had in 35 years of doing this. And the only way it's working is by asking every single person I talk to, is there anyone else you would refer me along to? No other way to do it. And then, as you move on, probably once you're past the validation stage, conferences, LinkedIn groups where they're very clearly interested in the same thing you are. There are lots of creative ways to do it, but don't get fooled. This has gotten way harder than it used to be. Steve Blank says it best. He says it profoundly. I won't try to quote him. It's the summary is get out of the building. Now, this got harder with COVID because so many people never leave their own buildings. But the ability to believe your own bullshit when you're sitting in your own office is extraordinary. Get to a coffee shop, get to a shared working space, get to their office, get wherever you can. Zoom is a poor substitute. It's not so poor you shouldn't do it if that's your only choice, but you will learn so much more. And what Steve Blank talks about is you want to be close enough that you see their body motion, you see the motion of their eyes, you see how their breathing changes. That tells you as much about what they're saying. Do they like it? Do they not like it? Are they getting bored? Get out of the building, if at all possible, get face-to-face. How I covered some of this already. Matt, you've got some value to add on this one because you pulled a couple of these off.
Yeah, honestly, starting off, it was, my network wasn't huge, but, it was important for customer validation for me. And honestly, there's not too many rules around it. You can be really, really creative on what you do to get this customer validation. And, like I mentioned before, I started off as a student. I don't know if my internet's going out. I apologize. I started my my company as a student, and I still had that .edu address. And so I thought, hey, I'm going to start working with my target market were universities. If I use my .edu address, it was really, really easy for me to email them and them accept it. And like Dave mentioned before, it's not about promoting the company or what we do. Is really about driving in the questions, understanding
It's
their
1 o'clock.
problems. Apologize about that. But understanding their problems and just really getting to know them from their point of view. And I mean, I use that .edu address for like, I want to say interviewing probably over 200 parking directors, which was, not sexy really, but, I really got to get so many data points from them. And it was an easier way in. If I were to use my company email, they might have thought it was a marketing email, probably just disregard it right away. So, I was lucky to have that edu address, but it was nice. And, LinkedIn's great. I've put a whole list of everyone on my LinkedIn, who are my connections with them, got their emails. So now my network is just growing more, and I can really try to just get anywhere pretty much and have a connection there.
Dave, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, that is like the perfect way to approach it. And yeah, totally agree. And you can almost take the mindset of being someone who's getting a cold email, whether it be on LinkedIn or just in your Gmail. If someone is, hey, I'm a student, And I'm just looking to learn from you. I saw you're an expert in this. Can I just have like 15 minutes of your time to learn from you? You're way more likely to respond to that than, you know, someone who's got a company name. Hey, right up the sales shield goes up. Oh, this person's trying to pitch me. What are they looking to get from me? And so not all of you may be students, but if there's any way you can sort of present yourself less of this is what I'm doing and I want your feedback or I want to sell you something. And this isn't sales, so you're really not trying to do that. But you know, being complimentary, they're kind enough to take time out. We're thankful for that. And you know, just someone who's really looking to learn from them, I think will you'd be surprised at how generous people can then be with their time.
Don't be afraid to ask questions. You know, that's a big barrier. And then, yeah, like Dave was mentioning right now, there's so many people that are out there that are nice and then willing to help. You know, it just really takes you to just speak up.
Yep, absolutely. One thing, if you do have to go on LinkedIn, that has always helped me a lot is you can search. I think you may have to have LinkedIn Premium, but you can search as you get deep in there, even by the university that they went to. So, hey, if you're a Sac State student or alum, you can find those job titles that you want to talk to, and they also went to your same university. Super powerful to be able to reach out to them and sort of personalize that, even with a quick mention in the email, much more likely to respond to you and give you that 15 minutes. And ask for 15, aim for 45. You know, ask for a small bite of the apple, but once you get them talking, then the sky's the limit.
Yeah. If you're engaging them on things they care about, which rolls back to don't describe your solution, ask about their problem. You, as Dave said, the sky's the limit.
I think that's how we met Steve. Yeah. I met Steve that way, just asking questions, to be honest. Yeah.
And I don't know if anybody mentioned, but if they have content on LinkedIn, engaging with that is also a great way to start that conversation.
Right. Yep. And you know, this quote at the bottom is more asking for, you know, coming to investors, but it's the same, you know, ask, will you buy my product? And you'll get probably no or advice. Ask, hey, could we talk about your problems? And who knows, they might buy your product. Okay, so what do I ask? In buckets. And Jane, I think this starts to get to the question you asked earlier. You got to start with demographics and firmographics. I said early on, you know, be structured and write things down. You're looking for a consistent customer cohort. So if you don't know how big the company is or how many employees they have or what their customers look like, you're just collecting oatmeal and you're going to stir it around with a little brown sugar and have a brown mess at the end of it that you can't do anything with. Get as much of this up front as you can from public data sources, because then you can just clear it. Then you're not sucking up 10 minutes of your 15 with information that's boring them. You can do it a couple ways. Hey, as I understand it, your business is about this big and you do this and you do this. Is that about right? Yeah, great. Or if you just got one minor thing, you know, get your content done. And then, hey, just one statistical thing I wanted to clear up before we hang off. And, you know, how many employees have you got? And that usually works. This is not a complete list, right? You got to think through what is going to drive different customer behavior for the solution that you're proposing. If it's in the consumer world, it may be an age mix, a gender mix, a regional mix. I mean, I have a client who does scorekeeping for kids' sports. So we care about whether they're in Little League or Babe Ruth or high school. And you wouldn't believe the demographic changes reflected underneath that. So you have to get smart about what's going to matter. And as you have more and more customer interviews done, you're going to add things to your list and cross some off. It's a living list. Just make sure it's a relevant list. Pain points. I come largely from an enterprise point of view, so adapt this a little bit more for SMB or for consumer. But typically, every executive in a Fortune 500 company has 3 things they're trying to get done this year. Okay, maybe it's 4 and they feel stressed. Maybe it's 2 because the company's in trouble. But you know, the average is 3. You don't want to be 4th on a list of 3, right? Because then you'll never, they'll say, I love you, I want to be there. We'll get to it next year. I mean, next year. So then it's what changes for them, or what changes, in your customer validation, it's what changes for your customer. If you're successful, then you want to bring that up and come back to your potential investor and say, if we're successful with 100 companies or 1,000 companies, here's what changes in the world. Because that's what the investors are looking for. How do they get 10x their money back out of you? Because something global has changed in a big way, and hopefully in a positive way. And then back to the interview, what role does the person you're talking to play in solving them? Are they an influencer? Are they a decision maker? Ideally, you want to find the person who has somebody's foot on his or her neck to make this happen, right? This is what they wake up every morning thinking about, and what they fall asleep every night thinking about. That's the perfect person. And then, what are the pain points and how do you address them? What's your value now that you're in discovery? Is your contribution, an aspirin or an emergency room or a miracle drug? And then what's the whole solution include? And that links back to what we were talking about earlier with respect to partners. You may not be able to solve the whole solution. Who else needs to be engaged with you, so that you can go to market together in a concerted way and solve the problem? No one wants to buy a wheel with 3 cars, or a car with 3 wheels. And then to the point, I forget if it was Dave or Nils made earlier, but how are they solving those problems today? And how would it be better if they had a solution that did X, Y, Z? A great question before presenting anything you're thinking about. Oh, wow, that's a really interesting problem. What would a perfect solution look like? Well, they just did your product roadmap for you for free in 5 minutes, right? Double check that against someone else, and you've got gold to take to the bank. Validation, right? Okay, now you've got your product idea that's been validated. Now go pressure test it. Go out farther into your ICP. Make sure is the problem right? Is the solution right? Can you clarify anything? How well would this solve? But this is where you have to be super, super careful not to lead your witness, right? Let them drive the conversation, follow the threads they're interested in, because sure, they'll take up the whole half hour talking about some minor thing that you think is important, but it's minor and they don't care, and they won't take your call again. Then you can get at the end to, geez, you didn't mention X, not the company formerly known as Twitter. I'm going to have to change my placeholders, but you didn't mention this one other thing we've been thinking about. Would that be important? Why not? And listen, and again, write these down. Best practice when you get to this stage is predict what they're going to say. Write that prediction down before you get on the phone. Then compare what they actually did say to your predictions. It'll tell you how close you're getting to being right. And write it down. If you put it in your brain will fool you and say, that's exactly what I thought they were going to say. Your brain will lie to you more than anyone else will. Willingness to pay. Is it a pain point? Right? What have they paid before? What would it be worth? You're not trying to do pricing here. You're trying to figure out how many zeros are in your price. Is it no zeros to the left of the decimal? Well, you better be doing a consumer product online. Is it $60,000 or more? Okay, that's going to be direct sales to enterprises, and better understand it's going to take you 6 months. Are you in the $6,000 to $60,000 band? There's no consistently viable go-to-market model in that price band. It's a really tough point to succeed. It's not expensive enough to pay a sales force, and it's too expensive to just do as a credit card. Okay, so you got to start thinking about how all these things tie together. And what would be included? What's your customer's economic ROI going to be about, and what factors would be included? You're not trying to do the math here, to do the math later. This is just trying to figure out what would go into such a solution. Where are the costs and benefits? Where do they come from? And the real math comes later. Okay, Plume, you killed us. How much is enough? 2 answers to that. when you've defined a cohort, ideally your ICP, and you're hearing basically the same thing over and over and over, you're done. Stop, move on. You don't have to talk to anymore. Cross-check on that is when you've taken my suggestion, you're writing down what you think is going to happen in the conversation, and you're right over and over and over. That's another good indicator. You've done as much as you need to at this stage. Quantitative really depends on your market. Consumer, gosh, well over 100, 150, 200. Matt, how many? You're not exactly a consumer, you're an SMB, but you said 250 or something?
Oh, hundreds. Yeah. I lost count. I've done questionnaires, I've done surveys. Yeah.
Enterprise, you better be talking dozens. It's going to be tough to do a successful customer validation exercise in any industry where you've talked to fewer than 50 people in a structured fashion, no matter what industry you're in. Climate tech, first of a kind kinds of things. Maybe there are only 7 possible companies in the world. Different corner case, but unusual corner case. So approach. I think I've said enough about your questions are going to change as you move along. That's just shows that you're learning. Open-ended, always better than closed-ended. And never ask a question along the lines of, if I had this, would you pay for it? Or would you buy it? Right. You know, that's a stage 3 kind of question. You know, my favorite example, a friend of mine, Steve, I can get you from San Francisco to Boston in an hour. Are you interested? Yeah, I'm interested. You don't mind that it costs $100,000, do you? Yeah, my interest goes down. Oh, by the way, 25% of the flights crash. Yeah, okay. My interest level is diminished fairly significantly. We all, as we go out to propose the solutions that we love and think are great, tend to leave out the cost and the crash part, right? You got to make sure all the information is open. Do as much homework as you can before you get there. Make sure you got your most important questions first. Maybe they'll give you 30, but maybe they'll give you 10. Get what you have to get answered. 2 powerful phrases. Tell me more, and then what? Because, you know, follow serendipity. What you're looking for is the unknown unknowns at this stage. And always end with, what should I have asked? And often, Dave, I'm sure you've hit this too. Conversation will be over. You'll be saying goodbye. Say, hey, Nils, what should I have asked? Boom, 30 more minutes.
Absolutely. Yeah. The great question to ask, it can lead to a whole other conversation that you weren't even expecting. And also I think you mentioned this earlier. Yeah. Always asking, hey, thank you so much for talking. Based on what we talked about, is there anyone else that you'd recommend I talk to? Those referrals are absolutely gold. And getting those warm handoffs, as you said earlier, Steve, is just like a magical way to connect with a lot more stakeholders. So I thought that was great advice to bring up here again.
Yeah, that's one thing I always end with is like, is there anyone else I should be talking to? You know, on top of, you know, what else should I have asked? It's a great thing, and you get so many introductions out of that.
Okay, so that's a lot of work. That's a lot of detail. Let's talk about outcomes and hit the home stretch and let Dave and Matt talk. What do you get? Product. Okay. You should have a really good definition of the pain. You should have a great definition of your ideal customer profile, which is the same as your point of market entry. And you should know where it sits in their priority stack. That kind of defines at least a first approximation of product market fit. You should understand what curing that pain is worth. That's going to help you with your valuation, with your investor conversations, and depending on what kind of the price point is and how you get there, that's going to pretty much outline your go-to-market strategy. And so you should have the 80% definition of your product market fit by the time you will learn more, your product will evolve. But in terms of going to investors and going to market with an MVP, you should be pretty much there. Right. And it should be, if it's not radically different from what you thought it was going to be when you started the interviews, I suggest you're at very high risk of drinking your own bathwater. Not 100%, but high risk. And why, and this is to defend to your customers and to your investors, why is your solution their best choice? Okay, customers. What are the characteristics of the ICP and how do you get to them? How many are in there? This is going to start telling investors what your market opportunity looks like and tell you as an operating company with cash to spend where you should be investing your resources, and who are your buyers going to be. This is now going to help the marketing piece of go-to-marketing. And again, where does it sit in their stack for each of your, not now at a individual level rather than at a company level. We should know your rough price point, who your partners are going to be, and if there are regulatory issues, what they are. All of these should be natural outcomes out of doing your 30 to 70 to 150 interviews in a structured, rigorous fashion. Oh yeah, who's going to help you solve those regulatory issues if you do have them? So let me give you kind of my parting thoughts briefly, and then we'll throw it open for Dave and Matt to other questions. Evolve, but not too quickly. You know, we've got get confidence before moving on. Iterate, right? This is the couple different charts I've shown you where keep moving up and to the right, but remember the arrows go the other way too. So it's kind of a loop around, you know, spiraling up among problem, solution, willingness to pay. Because if you change if you have willingness to pay and you're wrong one way or the other way, it doesn't matter. You got to go back to your problem and your solution and make it fit their willingness to pay. So don't be afraid of going back down the snakes and ladders game. Listen, 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 be curious, be engaged. Don't tell your customers what you want them to tell you. You know, listen at least 3 times more than you talk. I would say, having now been married for many years, this is more than business advice. This is kind of relationship advice too, but I'll leave that to you guys to figure it out. Don't trust your memory. If you didn't tape it or write it down, it didn't happen, throw it away, forget about it. Because your brain, in an hour, your brain will convince you something totally different happened. And structure is your friend. I've been telling this to people I've hired for 37 years now. You know, yes, creating a startup is an amazingly creative, qualitative act of wild left-brainness, right-brainness. I always get them wrong. You need the structure to keep that under control, or you're not going to get where you need to go. The creativity helps you figure out what to do. The structure helps you do it. And I want to caution against one thing you might take away from my comments is, oh my God, we got to go spend 6 months doing customer validation. We're going to do 10,000 interviews. And there's a balance. If you wait too long, your market window closes, your investment window closes. The market runs away from you. The customers change. You cannot get into analysis paralysis. You have to be doing this quickly. Neat Substack hit my screen the other day, Goblin mode. Just stop thinking and start doing. There's some point where you got to follow the old Nike people and just do it. And no one can tell you when that is. There's no milestone. There's no way to measure it. You just know, okay, it's time to go, or we're not going to make it. Resources I've mentioned, and I know Cameron's going to make this whole thing available for you. I think all 4 of those are great books. I only mentioned 2 of them as we were talking. Some articles, Steve Blank's website, Dave's website, and some Substacks that I've become a fan of, especially for SaaS companies. And there are many, many more. I'll try to put some other Substacks into each of these as we go along. I mean, I could spend my whole week reading really great newsletters and Substacks on SaaS companies, and then I wouldn't get anything else done. But there's some really good ones out there. And that's that. So, you know, Dave and Matt introduced themselves earlier. Let's see, Matt, you want to, maybe could you start and say, I think what would be interesting would be anything you would disagree with what we've covered, or different perspective. And then you've got a Zoom room full of prospective founders here. 3, 4, 5 top things you'd want them to know.
Yeah. No, I think what you've labeled out here is pretty true to, you know, even my whole journey through entrepreneurship and building a company. I guess the 5 biggest things I would say to leave here is just really understand the problem. You know, you don't want to create a solution that's creating more problems, right? You want to create a solution that people are actually going to use, and it takes a lot of work to really understand what those problems are. Um, you know, building a test to test your assumptions is something really, really important too. You know, once you get all that information, I mean, when I started, I had an Excel sheet of hundreds and hundreds of parking directors. I looked at all their problems, took the top three most common problems for all of, you know, all the demographics, and really focused in on what that was and started testing those, you know, those problems out. And sure enough, you know, that's the way that we were able to make or be successful within, you know, the parking industry. Oh, Joppa is a smart parking company, by the way, short for just a parking app. We like to Joppa like it's hot, work with universities, municipalities, stadiums. So, you know, a lot of the things that Steve was talking about today was just on point. You know, get creative, don't do anything illegal, but you know, we're entrepreneurs, we're innovative, you know, find innovative approaches to really get to these customers, your potential customers, you know, and really just be really one-on-one with them, be transparent, you know, be humble, you know, they're giving you a lot of time to answer your questions. So, you know, be gracious, be grateful for what they're doing. Um, I liked what Steve said is on, you know, this is an iterative process. You know, the longer you wait, the problems might change, you know. So this is something that's ongoing. Even till for my company today, you know, I'm still interviewing our customers, finding out what features we should be focusing on. Are the features that we have are, you know, irrelevant today? And that's where iterative feedback loops, you know, come from. It's just really going through, asking your customers. It's, you know, your customers are the ones that are paying you, you know, so you might as well just take care of them as much as you can, but don't strive too far from your actual goal. You know, when I started off, COVID hit, all of our customers shut down, from universities to hospitals, or actually hospitals were still going, but cities. And, you know, we pivoted to making smart drive-throughs, you know, partnered with Dutch Brothers Coffee. It was big success, but then, you know, we had to take a step back and be like, hey, we're not solving the problems that we are actually out there for. You know, let's go back to square one and just, you know, revamp everything. So I would say stay focused, stay resilient. You know, a lot of these customers might not like what you're building, you know, and then just take that feedback. Don't get distraught. Don't feel bummed out about it. Use that for the keys to success and keep moving forward. Understand your customers, use your engagement metrics, you know, find out exactly what KPIs are important to you and for you to know what traction is going well for. Um, I didn't even count. I was just going off, Steve. So I think I might have hit 6 or 7 there, but yeah. But I would say that's the most important thing, especially through my experience.
So Matt, and we'll get to Dave for a minute. So I actually know the answer to this trick question, but not everybody else here does. So what was the kind of interaction among getting proof points from customers and raising money for Joppa?
Oh man. So many stories here. So Joppa is a B2B SaaS company, but we have a consumer mobile app, or commuter mobile app that we say. So we deal with consumers as well. And I had to focus on both interactions, you know, from the enterprise sales to the consumer. Um, I mean, I literally dressed up as a parking cone costume before and went to a university on the busiest day and directed cars to open parking spaces to really validate what the customers want. Totally embarrassing, but every time a car parked, we'd say, hey, did this help you out? And every time they're like, yeah, this is awesome. And I said, okay, cool. We're building a mobile app doing the exact same thing. Sign up for a mailing list. Boom, checked off validation, validation, validation. That was a weird, you know, interaction with them, but it was a way where we were able to validate our idea without having to build anything. You know, being a company that's small and new, very, very, you know, not too many resources, not too much funding at those stages. You got to be, you know, innovative with it. And that was a great way where, yeah, we got our idea out there to the consumers doing the same thing. It could have been a piece of paper, you know, I could have just put a balloon up or anything, but, you know, we were able to engage with them. And then when it came down to, you know, enterprise universities and cities, I took the approach that Dave talked about, that Steve talked about, was just be humble, be gracious with what you're talking to. And then when it came down to investors, I took that same approach. I asked, you're going to get 1,000 no's for one yes, if it comes down to funding. You got to be resilient through all that and just take everything with, okay, cool. Thank you for all that advice. I appreciate it. I'll see you back in a couple weeks and I'll change your mind on everything. So I would say the engagement is just, honestly, Steve, it's different for everyone. You just got to go in it with an open mind, open arms, and just be able to read the room well and interact with it. I think Dave, you can speak a little bit more on this one, but yeah, I mean, my experience, it was everywhere pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic advice. And just to sort of almost piggyback on what you said, yeah, open mind, humble, flexible, those are great qualities of an entrepreneur and so important with this customer validation process. The wonderful thing about this is it's totally okay to be wrong. And frequently you will be. And not only is that okay, it's encouraged. You can go in. I call this process applying the scientific method to business. You're going to make hypotheses. You're going to go out and talk to people to validate or invalidate them. Hey, I think that whatever the job title is, if we could save them an hour a day, it would mean this to them. And you'll go out and validate or invalidate that. And if you will end up talking to people who are not your customer, and that alone is really helpful information. So you're going to be constantly sort of iterating, and that's sort of the magic and fun of it. And then through that, you will really refine and drill down who your top customer is and what they really care about and how you can solve that problem for them. And that's where the magic happens. But it's totally okay to be wrong. Say, hey, I'll bet this person wants this, and then that's not the case, and then iterate from there.
Let me just put maybe an unexpected riff on that. It's okay to be wrong. Starting a SaaS company is a 7 to 10 year commitment. Most SaaS companies get started these days with founder money and money from the founder's friends and parents and sisters and whatever, right? The people you care about most who will bet on you the most. If you get out there during the customer validation and you discover, what, this company's never going anywhere, you get to give most of that money back to those people who care about you. If you blow it and now you've converted that all into a first round that's been priced by an institutional investor, and then you discover you were wrong, well, okay, you've just wasted 3 or 4 years of your life, and you've got a whole lot of people you got to kind of apologize to. Go back to that 1,000 to 1 odds. 999 of those companies should have stopped before they got to the stopping point. Save yourself time and money.
That's a great point, and goes back to one of your earlier slides, the risk, the de-risk.
Yeah.
And this process will help you, your investors, everyone in that ecosystem to de-risk your next steps. And yeah, if you know that if you find out through this that the market just isn't there, there's not a scalable business model for you, that is actually an incredibly wonderful thing to know very early on before you move forward, before you make those heavy investments of time, resources, money, etc. So this at its heart is a de-risking program for investors, for founders, for everyone who could be involved in that process.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, thanks, guys. We can keep asking questions, but I'd like to throw it open, very explicitly. AMA, me, Dave, Matt, Nils. We haven't introduced Nils, but he'll field questions.
Tell anybody anything, Steve.
Right, there we go. And it doesn't have to be on customer validation. It can be on venture capital, ideal investment profiles, some of the topics we got coming up. If you got a question, ask up and we'll do our best. And if not, in the meantime, Dave, how many, while Nils is scrolling questions, Dave, how many companies have gone through your program?
We do about 8 plus a month. So probably about 100 plus a year. Early stage founders, two, three people, basically sometimes teams, sometimes they haven't even incorporated yet. So alluding back to what I said earlier, hey, the earlier you do this process, the better. Don't wait. This is the most valuable thing you can do early on. You'll never stop doing this, but starting it early is really valuable. But yeah, we do about 8 startups a month-ish. Run them through it. Basically, our program is just a structured pathway to this. A lot of the stuff, how to conduct customer discovery, market validation, a lot of the stuff really that Steve outlined and Matt outlined today, to really sort of run through it. But it helps to do it in sort of like, you're sort of accountable if you're in this course and there's like a 1 week, you're like on the spot, you got to get them done. So it does sort of light a fire, but yeah, it's really cool. In just 1 week, in 1 week's time, even just 15 interviews, the learnings are absolutely phenomenal. You get to see that learning journey through that 1 week course. So yeah, by the time you get to like 50 plus, it just completely changes, very more often than not, completely changes your outlook on who you thought was your customer and why, from where you start to where you end in this validation process.
And where do companies go when they're done with your class?
Some will continue on. There's another sort of longer customer validation program. Some will do that. That has 100 more over 7 weeks. A lot of times they will just go on to other accelerators or incubators. Very often we do a lot of deep tech startups, so longer time to market. So a lot of them will apply for non-dilutive funding opportunities like the National Science Foundation, SBIR, things like that. Or just seeking dilutive funding, venture angel funding. So yeah, those are sort of like the different ways, different pathways forward, but usually some form of seeking funding or being in a structured program like an accelerator or incubator where you can get mentorship as you move forward. But I mean, and sometimes they just find, as you said, Steve, like, hey, we actually maybe don't have, enough here to continue with this. And then they won't continue on, and that's still a great learning to have versus the parallel universe where they go forward for 6 months, then realize it. So that's not an uncommon and not a bad outcome to have either.
Yeah, honestly, I think customer validation is such a fun process. I mean,
Mhm.
it gets you pumped up to learn more about your customers, the industry. You just grow and your company grows. I love it, and I might be different because I love talking to people, but I mean, just picking everyone's brains, just finding out the things that you don't know, and then finding out what you can start building for them, being innovative. It's just such a fun process.
Nils, we got one there?
We do have a question about LinkedIn. What's a good
Yep.
link? What's a good 200 character intro text in a LinkedIn invitation on a connection invite? I would say Google it personally, because there's many examples on the internet of good introductions.
All right, everybody give a lightning answer. Nils' answer is Google it. I know what mine is, but go ahead, Dave.
Mine probably the short and sweet is, very brief introduction. Again, if you can be a student, a researcher, something like that, not a founder. I saw you're an expert in this. I saw you spoke at this conference. Some personalized thread, even a little bit. I saw you're an expert in this topic. I'd love to learn more from you. Do you have 15 minutes? Something where you can personalize it, present yourself as a non-founder, just looking to learn from them and being super enthusiastic and how much it would mean to you if they'd be willing to do that. Short and sweet.
I think I'm just going to echo Dave there. Make it personal, make it relevant, make it brief. I think that's the best ways for LinkedIn. Don't do any templated, messaging. No, everyone's just going to disregard that right away. Yeah. And people want to see something brief. They want to hear their name and what they've done, and it gets them excited. So yeah, same thing, Dave.
Yep. Yeah, totally agree. The more you can, and that takes, of course, more time to do that. You have to invest more, and not every email or LinkedIn connection you send will get a response, and that's totally fine. But putting in those personalized threads will, like we talk about, people get inundated with emails, or you're asking a favor of them. People are surprisingly kind and generous with their time, but I think like making it more personalized gives them that pull in to do that.
Yeah, and Nils, what you mentioned earlier too, responding to, a webinar that they put out or some publication or even an article is a great way to get your name at the top of their head, message them on a personal level after, and then, you can really tie them in.
Exactly.
I would, my two were going to be tie it into something they have published. I saw your newsletter, I saw your webinar, I saw this. I'd like to follow, and it was so great. And let me talk to you about something totally unrelated, right? That's a waste of time. Hook in on, like to drill down farther on something you mentioned. And then there is simply no better thing than, our mutual friend Bob suggested I contact you. Find a way in. We're not investing anymore, but when we had a fund still to invest, I got 30 LinkedIns and 30 emails a week, just absolutely cold. Often it was funny because keep in mind, I was running an early stage enterprise SaaS fund. And I would get connections that said, Steve, based on your success and interest in the cannabis industry, Steve, based on how much you've done in orthopedic surgical medical tech. It's like, okay, first off, those people didn't do any homework at all. They have no clue what they were talking about. And then the other, especially on LinkedIn, I'm out there. I've got thousands of connections. I've been around a long time. If you can't find a connection into me, you haven't tried very hard.
No.
If you can't find someone to introduce yourself to me. Okay, good. Let's see. We're at hour and 40 almost. I don't want to bore people. We'll go, another 30 seconds for additional questions from the audience. Dave or Matt or Nils, any closing comments you'd like to make?
Dave, you can go first while I think of some. No, just kidding.
Maybe the only very last small thing I'll add is at the end of every interview, the one other thing I always like to do is just say, hey, if I have any other questions, would be okay if I reached out again in the future. Yeah. Maybe you're going to want to talk to them again. They're always going to say yes. No one's going to say no. So you've already sort of tacitly got that. And hey, like you said, maybe in 6 months you're going to reach out and they're going to be one of your first sales. Hey, remember when you said how much it would mean to you if someone could do this? I've done it. I've built that now. And so leaving that door open for further chats is always something that I like to do as a last note.
Hey, honestly, Dave, that's how we got our first customer. It was literally just customer validation to UC Berkeley, where you're at already.
I love it.
And I just said, hey, is it cool if I keep you in my network? So if I have questions, I can come back to you, kind of use them as a little advisor at first, and then sure enough, a couple months down the road, he's like, hey, we're looking into something like this. And boom, first customer right there. And it was awesome. So I think network is extremely important. Nurture your network, make sure you're still talking to them, because you never know what you're going to need at what times and who's going to help you with it. And the bigger your network, the more humble you are, the more likely people are going to want to work with you and just keep pushing out there. So utilize those resources. There's a ton of resources out there, even from pitch competitions to get you some funding without even investors, to just even getting you to investors.
Amazing story. Nothing bad has ever happened from having a conversation, and that's proof positive of it. Great example.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Nils.
I would add one thing on that. Those people are really great to keep in your network ongoing once you have the product, because having a kitchen cabinet of advisors, people you can reach out to with ideas over time, incredibly valuable. I did want to say there's a question in the chat. This is from Kevin Williams. Kevin, do you just want to ask your question? Go ahead and unmute yourself. Or not. My group works with startups to obtain interest from funding sources, although I am aware of sectors which are of interest in general. What sectors, niches do you personally find appealing going forward? And Kevin says he's got trouble with his mic. I'm not exactly sure the question here, to be honest.
No, I think it's, where are the hot spots is the way I would interpret it.
There you go.
Look, VCs to some extent are lemons, and VCs like quick sound bites. With that said, I've talked with half a dozen VCs independently in the last several months who've all said some variation of the only question that matters for any startup is what's your AI strategy? Now, I think that's over the top, but it's reflective of just how important AI is going to be. And that's not to suggest that anyone ought to be going and doing another general purpose AI. Tens of billions, if not hundreds, have already been thrown at that. I think, we got to wait and see how that shakes out. But purpose-built AI for, really specific applications becomes very interesting. I can only give you, the plural of anecdotes is not data, right? And so what I've got is anecdotes, not data. Healthcare, of course, supply chain, in what looks to be a world that is deglobalizing fairly rapidly, at least for the next economic cycle. Nearshoring, friendshoring, reshoring, onshoring. How do you manage all that? Cyber has gone from 0% of your basic enterprise's budget to close to 10%. Those are things. Oh, and talent management is a huge topic right now. The big companies, for 10 years now, I've heard them complaining that anyone who's any good gets pulled out by a startup or big tech, and they just can't build. Management is now suffering because the baby boomers are retiring, and there's no one who's been trained over enough time to come up and take over in anywhere near the same level of competency. Those are things I'm interested in. I mean, lots of people are interested in fintech. One of our CEOs next Thursday will be in fintech. On this Thursday, it's going to be a purpose-built AI CIO or CEO. So some scattering of mine.
AI for sure is the talk of the town right now. And parking. No, I'm just kidding.
Parking was a given. Of course, parking.
I don't know how you left that out.
And then after that, it's everything else. Cool. Fun note to end on. Speculative, general. So I hope everybody enjoyed it. I really want to thank Nils and Dave and Matt for coming on and helping me with this. Cameron and Absentia for sponsoring it and organizing it. And hope to see as many of you back on Thursday as can make it. If you liked it, tell your friends. It's open, it's free, share the link. If you didn't like it, I suggest you go watch the news about the election and forget about it completely. All right, be well, everybody.
One more thing, Tech
Yeah.
Futures Group is a great resource too. So definitely apply to them. I've been a part of Tech Futures Group since I was born, it seems like. So yeah, great resource.
Great. Thanks for that, Matt. Okay. Be well, everybody. Take care.
Thanks, y'all.
On Thursday.